Is there something to the fact that we started this conversation with young adults, invitations from young adults to young adults, having the sense that there's something maybe was bubbling, something was stirring, there's some yearning, there's something maybe that gets either under or over or around or through the institutions as we know it? I don't know. I'm just curious. Is there some unique reality here that's kind of calling for us to pay attention and say, what about young adults?
One thing that comes to mind is, despite all of the divisions and divisiveness that may be present, in churches, disagreements on different social, political issues, there seems to be like one thing that kind of like everybody has in common, and it's like, where are the young adults in the church? It's like they're all concerned about the, mean age of the church going up and up and up, and not a lot of young people, and how youth and young adults are connecting with the church to do, and how the giving in the church and attendance in the church is a little bit different generationally, and how that affects everything. So it's I feel like young adults are like the subject of a lot of conversation, not always being part of the conversation necessarily. And I definitely have my thoughts on the matter, but I think that, having the church hear from young adults should be really hopeful, that we are, concerned about the future of the church, that we might not be as interested on the things that are causing, trouble, like in the church, but we're more concerned about, I think it's like the, millennials or whatever. Like, I think I'm actually technically not a millennial, maybe like Generation X or something. But I identify myself with the millennials, and because like I've read that generation is much more outgoing and wanting to make change and things like that, much more proactive, and maybe the vision of what United Methodist Church is and should be is different, for us than it is for the generation that preceded us. So it's, like, these conversations are good to just to show that, we have our own thoughts, we have our own hopes, we have our own dreams, and we're still committed and passionate about the things that United Methodist Church should be doing.
I think one of the things that is really hopeful about the conversation that's happening now is that the invitation is from other young adults. I think that's one of the churches ask, where are the young adults? Well, I mean, you kind of have to have young adults in order to get young adults. So I think that it's good that the initiative of this conversation for young adults. And maybe that's something that we need to think more about, and perhaps empowering the young adults in congregations is the next step, and saying we give you permission to invite people in, I mean, perhaps there are some young adults that need to hear that. Also connecting back to what Kelly was saying about energy and resources, and maybe part of that empowerment is putting some resources behind the young adults that you have and saying we are willing to invest in what you see is the important part.
Well, coming from a church that has I guess scarce numbers of young adults that attend, I always see a need for, revitalized people to either come in and kind of help, just revitalize, not only Asbury, but the church as a whole. I've seen like students of my age group that I went to school with throughout, because when I started first attending Asbury, I was still in high school, junior high school. And so growing up with, certain students and children, I kind of saw them kind of move away from the church and attend different churches now as young adults. So, that's why, I guess I kind of leaned that way because it's, I guess, more of a need for, our congregation. But hopefully, it's a need for every congregation to kind of have a sense of, trying to connect with, younger generations coming up. Because also we don't have a youth minister at our church, which is also kind of unnecessarily hindering the growth of our youth, but it won't necessarily bring them back when they become young adults. So when you kind of cut out generations, younger generations, you won't have anything to build upon. And our church is really dominated by the older generations, primarily like 50 and up, really. So the need for the young adults, even the youth, to kind of get together, have small forums of some sort, get together, have a game night, the block party, it would be definitely, it would be a tremendous asset to building future generations of the church and keep it going for years to come. So
I think the benefit of having any one group together is it just is easier to communicate. You have more of a shared language. But past that, I think the more diverse a group is, the more beneficial it is. And so I usually am not as interested in being involved in something that's like a group of like single women, or like all people my age, or like all people that don't have kids, like any group that I've, am labeled under. I'm not as interested in being involved in a group with everybody that's the same as I am being involved in a group that's diverse. And I know that maybe that's just me, and I think that some people really need and like and want, like a women's group or a men's group, but to me, I'm just not. I don't feel like those are as beneficial to me as being involved in a diverse group. And so I think there's a lot of benefit from integrating age groups. One question is about age groups. And I think that from what I've heard at Mount Vernon Place, I've been here about 3 years, and it's grown a lot in that time, and the age group has, or the average age has dropped a lot in that time. But from what I've heard from a couple of years before that, when there really were almost no younger people, and how that came to be, I think MVP didn't attract young people because they had young people. From what I've heard, they attracted young people because the community was really strong, and they shared meals, and they during the service they did. Because I asked Donna, the pastor, when I first came, I said, "What made this happen?" And she said that the meals were a big part of it, and doing joys and concerns, when people shared during the service the specific things that were going on in their lives, and they asked for prayer requests, and I think there's something that's really unique about hearing someone else pray for you, you know, not just stating your prayer request, but when you hear other people say, you know, that prayer for you. And so I think that when you talk about attracting young people, I think that you can attract young people with young people, but I think you really want to attract young people and all people by a strong community. You know, that's what you want to draw people to, because that will build community in the long run. And so I don't know if that, I don't mean to argue against, you know, anything that's for a specific age group, but that's just kind of my perspective on where the real benefit is.
From hearing what everybody's saying about this, I very much recognize this own tension within me of seeing the need of an age-specific group, but also people needing to feel like they're part of this larger group and have that be very authentic. And my experience of when I graduated from high school, I went away to college, but I didn't go super far away, so I came home on weekends every couple of months. And I would come home and I had this amazing community at my home church. And that was great. I felt very lifted up. But I didn't have anywhere to go after the church service when everyone departed to their Sunday school rooms. And I was left in the gathering room with a couple of other people who were playing hooky from class. And so for me, there's something there. There's something there. And so when I moved away again and then came back and helped out with the young adult group, trying to help start a young adult group at my home church. And to me, I could really see that there was this need to have a space that was opened up. There became a need with this young adult group that formed to be visible. Because as much as people were talking about, we want young adults here, because that was the focus, you almost can't pay attention to the young adults that are actually there, because you're looking at the limited number of people as a negative instead of a positive. These people are here. So I think, I don't exactly know what I'm concluding out of this, but I think that there's something special in the fact that this group is a young group of people. And this makes us not only visible to ourselves, but visible to others as well. I think visibility is needed in order to be a part of the whole or feel part of the whole.
So I want to jump on a couple of things that interested me. So I think, Emily, I liked your point about, just thinking about looking at the limited number of young adults being a negative, and kind of ties back to Kelly and her mention of the Methodist Church already having a lot of positive things. So thinking about this partnership stuff, it's easy to think about the glass half empty, but there's also a lot of positive too. And we're all here on a Saturday afternoon talking about all these things. So that's pretty awesome. So just keeping that in mind, just not nitpicking, I guess, at some of the negative. And then I also like the idea of empowerment. I think it's a very Methodist thing too, if you think about the importance of lay leadership, and that lay leaders are empowered to be really active drivers of their congregation. And I think just holding on to that we can empower sort of our lay leaders and our young adults to be drivers in this partnership. You don't have to sort of wait for it to trickle down, I guess. And then what I like about young adults that I think, going back to we're still forming in many ways, is that perhaps we're a little less laden with baggage at the moment. And so we're bringing sort of a freshness, I think, that can be lost. as time goes by, we haven't had sort of this can't work sort of experiences yet, or we've had fewer of them. So I think that's actually a positive that we can bring to the conversation.
I very skeptical of the usefulness of young adult as an identifier. And it's clearly a statistical observation that this age group is lacking in our congregation. So we're going to label that age group, which keeps getting pushed back a little bit. It's up to 35 now. Right? I think it's 35. 35? And label that age group young adult. But going beyond that, the diversity of the young adult experience, speaking partly to the fact that it now goes to 35, is huge. There's a huge diversity between people who've just left their undergraduate education or just left high school and people in their early 30s. And there's a huge range of experience there. And as a young adult, my young adult identity is quickly subsumed by my young parent identity. I mean, that certainly comes before my affiliation with a young adult group. But I think that speaks to how important this process is, because a process that privileges listening is going to get at the uniqueness of the young adult perspective in whatever context we're in. So if a church is looking to reach young adults, then listening to the young adults in that community is an essential first step, rather than making assumptions about what we think we know about the young adult category. Because if your young adults are primarily young parents, then how you invest resources is going to be very different than if your young adults are undergraduate age or somewhere in that line. So when I think about investing resources, I want paid, skilled nursery workers. That's what I want to support this young adult. That's a priority for me. But that's not going to be a priority necessarily for other folks in that age category. So I think it speaks highly to this process and privileging a dialogue and listening as a way to reach what is just a very diverse group of people.